Okay, looks like it's time to get started. Thank you everyone for joining our live lecture today. My name is Isaac and I'll be the lead instructor for the lecture. And today's topic is going to be Backend Foundations in JavaScript Part 2. So what that means is this lecture will cover the second half of the Node.js curriculum. So if you're in that section, this is the lecture for you. A couple things to mention before we get started today. The first one being is we're going to stop periodically throughout this lecture to open the floor for questions. So if you do have those come up along the way, we just ask that you wait until those designated times to ask them. Another thing to mention is that we're recording this lecture. So once we're done here, we are going to be posting it on our YouTube channel. We're going to make that link available to you in your student dashboard. Okay, so diving right in, let's go and discuss what topics we'll be learning about today. And there's two primary subjects we're going to be focusing on, okay? And that is going to be Sequelize and Passport. So let's go ahead and go over each of those. So first, let's go refer to the docs for Sequelize. Okay, so Sequelize is an ORM, object relational mapping tool, and it's going to allow us to interact with our SQLite database. Okay, and then we're going to be learning about how to use Passport to set up user authentication and login sessions and all that. Okay, so to get started, go ahead and navigate to this URL, and it's a repository I've set up for this lesson. We can go ahead and copy that to our clipboard, change directories to our desktop, and then we'll go ahead and clone that right on in. Okay, so now let's change directories into the JS backend, and now let's go ahead and let's open that up inside of our text editor here, JS backend 2. Okay, so now we'll just take a minute to go up the file tree here and talk about what's going on with this starter kit. So we got package.json file. This is a mixture of some metadata about our app, some script commands, as well as some dependencies we need to install to be able to run this project. So to get started, I'm going to run the command npm install. Okay, and I'll reference each of these and install it in our root directory under a node modules folder. And as you can see, we're installing basic Express server along with the dependencies needed for Sequelize. Okay, so now we brought in the node modules. Let's look at our index.js. Okay, this is a server file. Okay, and at this time we got module imports here. We're configuring our request in its JSON format. Right here we got a connection to our database. If you notice, our database is actually located inside our project right here, right? Chinook SQLite. Okay, so what you'll need to do is you'll need to erase the storage path here, and you'll need to make it match your own storage path, right? Because this is privy to my machine. So what you do is you just hover over Chinook SQLite and just click on copy path, and then from there you can paste that right on in. Okay, and next we define a schematic for our data. Okay, and so within this database it has several different tables, but one of those tables is an artist table. Okay, and the artist table has a couple of different characteristics. It's got an artist ID and a name. And by default, the artist ID will be created for us, auto increment, so each ID is unique. The name, we just have to pass in ourselves, and that's just a custom string. Down here, we got some configuration options. Freeze table name basically means it's not going to ignore this name for the actual table name in the database. And then timestamps means, we're not going to put any timestamps, right? Because we passed in false here. And last, we got our, basic Express run server running at port 3000. So now we have a better idea of what's going on with this project. Let's go ahead and let's run this by referencing the package.json and the start script here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say npm start. Okay. And now our server is running. Okay, so from here, we can use Sequelize to interact with our database and perform operations. Okay, and the most common operations performed on a database are known as CRUD. And CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's set up an API to where we can interact with our artist. Okay, so I will simply label this API. Okay, and, just for a quick review, API stands for Application Programming Interface. And it's a series of publicly exposed endpoints, which allows us to communicate with our server. Now, I want to go ahead and I want to set the first operation, which is to create an artist. Okay, so if I'm going to create an artist, I need to post some data to my server. So to do that, I'm going to do a post request. Okay, so I'll just say app.post, and then we'll have an artist endpoint. So we send in the request, and the response that's sent back will be the artist itself, right? So first, we got to reference the artist schema here and use it to find the artist. Okay, and let's say for this general endpoint here, we want to set it up to where it takes in a request body, and it will use part of that request body to add the artist. Okay, so that being said, let's go ahead and let's say artist dot create. Okay, first thing we're going to pass in is what we want to create. So we'll say the name of the artist, right? I'm matching this schema here. The name is going to be a string. So I'll say rec.body.name. Okay, and then after that's created, we will send a status of 200, which means success. Okay, so now let's go ahead and save all, and let's try to use the tool Postman to send a request to this endpoint, see if we can add an artist to our database. Okay, so I'll refresh my server to pick up on those changes, and in Postman, go ahead and boot this up. Close out of those. Okay, and now let's do a post request to localhost 3000/artist. Okay, and we need to pass in a name for the new artist. So let's call it the Wizards. And so we send that off. And as you can see, we get a status of 200, which means it was successfully added. So now we need to be able to read that data, right? We need to be able to actually see it was added. Okay, so that's where a GET request would come into play. So let's go ahead and say app.get artist. And for this first GET request, let's just make it retrieve all artists from the database. So to do that, I'm going to say artist and use the find all method, which at that point is going to return all the artists. And then we can go ahead and we can send them back. So I'll say res.json artists. Okay. So from here, we can go ahead and save all and refresh our server. We go to Postman, and let's do a GET request to localhost 3000/artist. Okay, and as you can see, it sends us back all the artists from our database just by using this find all method. Okay, so you notice pattern here, we're just, referencing the artist schema, and then we're using a method off of that, right, for each of these operations. Okay, so now let's go ahead and set up an endpoint to where we can query one specific artist. Because if we go Postman, we scroll to the very bottom, you can see that it added our artists, the Wizards, right? And sometimes we're going to want to query, a single artist by itself. So to do that, we need to set up another endpoint for GET, except this time it'll say artist, and we'll have a request parameter for the artist ID. Excuse me. Okay, so let's say rec. Send a request, okay, and the response will send back. First, we will say artist find. Okay, an artist where the artist ID is equal to the request parameter ID. Okay, then once it finds that artist, We're going to take it, we're going to send it back in response. Okay, so let's go ahead and save all, refresh our server, and pick up on those changes. Okay, we head back to Postman now. We do a get request, and this time we'll pass in a request parameter. Let's do artist 276. We send that off. We can see this time, instead of finding all artists, it finds one artist and sends that back. Right? Test this out even more. Maybe artist number 3, right? So as we can see, depending on the ID, we'll get a different artist now. Okay? So now we've learned how we can create and read different artist data. Let's go ahead and learn how we can also find that data and update it. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's set up a put endpoint for this. So we'll say app.put / artist, and then I'll put in a request parameter for this as well. Okay. And then the first thing we need to do is we need to set up the update method. Okay, so we're going to say it's artist.update. And then this is going to take in 2 things. What we want to update it with, so we'll say the new name of the artist will be the coders. And then the second argument is going to be targeting what we want to update. So I'm going to say target the data where the artist ID is equal to the request params ID. Okay. From there, we'll produce a result, at which time we'll send that back. Okay. So let's go ahead and save all. Refresh our server. Let's go back to Postman, and let's do a put request, and let's try to update artist 276, which is our wizards artist to the coders. Okay, so we send that off. We can see this send us 1 back, and that means true, that means successful. Okay, so now if we do a get request for artist 276, we can see it's changed from the wizards to the coders. Okay, and we were able to do that using this update method. Okay, so now let's learn how we can delete and remove data. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say app.delete, and then we'll pass in artist, and once again, we'll pass in the ID of the artist we want to delete. Okay, so it starts off by looking up the artist. So we'll say find the artist where the artist ID is equal to the request params ID. Okay. And once you find the artist, let's go ahead and we're going to use what's called the destroy method. The destroy method will remove this. And then after that, let's go ahead and send back the status 200 for success. Okay, so from here, let's save all. And let's refresh. Let's head back to Postman. Now let's run a delete request, just like we have here for artist 276. Send that off. We get status of 200 successful. So now if we do a get request for that same artist, we can see it sends back null because the artist no longer exists. We've removed it from the database. Okay, so using Syncrolize, this is how you can perform basic CRUD operations on your server. So let's go ahead and let's put on the brakes, open up the floor, and see if anyone has any questions so far. Okay, so floor is open. If you have questions, feel free to ask those now. Okay, I don't hear anyone. Assuming we're all good. So if that's the case, let's move forward to the topic of authentication. Okay, so authentication is talking about how when we create sessions to log in a base user. And there's a couple of different approaches to this. These days, the two most common approaches is to use local authentication, which is just basic email password combination, or to use third-party authentication, which is using a service like Facebook or Google or Twitter to log in your user using their already existing account on one of those providers. Okay, and while both of these strategies are perfectly valid, the third-party authentication tends to be the more popular approach, and it actually is more secure too, because for a hacker to infiltrate your software, they would have to get through not only your protective layer, but also the third-party provider, which it's really unlikely that would happen. So that being said, we're going to be using the Passport.js library to implement these authentication strategies. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off by installing Passport. So I'm going to say npm install Passport -save and good. Okay. Next, we need to install the provider library. And today we're going to be using Facebook as our third-party provider to authenticate our user. So I'm going to say npm install passport-facebook. -save and enter. Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and let's import these into the top of our server here. So we'll start with Passport. Okay, I'll say Passport, let's require Passport. Okay, and then we'll break in the Facebook strategy. Okay, and that's going to equal require Passport -Facebook dot strategy. Okay, so from here we need to set the configuration for this strategy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, drop down right here, and I'll just say auth config. And I'll start off by saying passport.use, and I will say new Facebook strategy. Okay. And then we need to pass in the configurations. Okay. So to configure this, we're going to have to go create an application on developer.facebook.com. Okay. So if you don't already have an account, go ahead and sign up for one, and after you do, go ahead and create your first application. As you can see, I just created a new app on my developer Facebook account. And from here, I just need to go to set up Facebook login. And they're going to ask us which platform. We're going to use the web. And then our site URL is going to be localhost 3000. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that in. Save. Then from here, they're going to go ahead and they're going to suggest we use their SDK, client-side libraries. But because we're using Passport, we can just go ahead and skip through this and go right to the settings. From here, we need to set up a valid redirect, which is going to be localhost 3000. Then from there, we save those changes. As you can see up here, you got a little warning, but it actually has nothing to do with what we're doing right here. So you can disregard that for the moment and go to basic settings to where we can acquire our credentials for our app ID and app secret. So I'm going to start by copying my app ID, and then within the config here, it's called the client ID. And then we will set up the client secret the same way. Come back to our account, show it, copy it, and we paste it on in. Next, we need to set up what's called a callback URL. And basically what's happening is a two-step process where whenever you authenticate, it's going to make a request to Facebook's authentication service, and then After that's done, it's going to make another callback request to another endpoint. And that's what we're putting in here. So we'll just go ahead. We'll say localhost, oops. Let's grab localhost 3000 /auth /Facebook /callback. Okay. And from here, we got to go ahead and we got to configure the callback function. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, say function. And this is going to produce a couple different tokens along with our profile and some done middleware. Okay, so the first token is going to be access token. Then we're going to have a refresh token. Then we're going to have our profile that's returned. And we're going to have the done middleware. Okay, so from here, I'm going to console log the profile. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the done middleware to complete the process, passing that profile. Next, we need to set up our API endpoint for authenticating our users. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to say app.get /auth /Facebook. When they hit this endpoint, I'm going to say passport.authenticate using Facebook. And then it will start the authentication process. Once that's complete, it's going to hit the second endpoint here, which is the callback URL. We'll say auth /Facebook /callback. Okay, and then once they hit that endpoint, we'll say passport.authenticate Facebook. And then we will have a success redirect, which will just be home. And then we'll have a failure redirect, which will be back to the login page. Okay, so now we just have to hit this endpoint and or hit this endpoint, and then it's going to complete the authentication process, hit this callback URL, and complete it from there. So to test this out, let's go ahead and save all. And let's refresh our server here. We'll say npm start. Okay, and then we're going to navigate to localhost 3000 /auth /Facebook. Okay, so as you can see, I am successfully authenticating my user through their Facebook account. So I will continue as Isaac. Oops. Looks like it says unknown authentication strategy. Oh, yeah. Looks like I forgot the E here. That'll throw a wrench in things. Okay. Let's save all. Let's refresh our server here. Okay. We'll try localhost 3000 /auth /Facebook. Okay. Now, as you can see, now instead of returning an error, we are returning the tokens up here and then the user profile. And we can see here console log is the actual user profile itself. So this has been generated from my Facebook account. So that is how we can use Passport to log in our users using Facebook as a provider. Okay, but just keep in mind that you can use other providers such as Google, Twitter, GitHub, etc. It's just whenever you use a different provider, their strategy is going to be slightly different. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all. I can't go through here and just switch out Facebook for Twitter. It doesn't work like that. Some providers have, 3, different secret keys. Some have 1, some have 2, right? So that's why you've got to install, that provider library depending on who you're using, because they all kind of have their slightly different approaches. But that being said, let's go ahead and open up the floor one last time, see if anyone has any remaining questions. So the floor is open. If you have questions, feel free to ask them now. Okay, not hearing anyone. Going once, going twice. All right, we're out of here. Thanks everyone for stopping by. Have a great rest of your day and happy coding out there.